Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey team. So today I want to talk to you about 3-minute abs. It's a thing, and it's also a metaphor. The first 2 episodes of my podcast were about these kind of big, complex cornerstone topics of my coaching practice, energy and authenticity. And today I just wanted to share a concise little nugget of an idea, something you can really get your brain around. I think our brains often respond really well to stories. We're interested in them. We remember them really well. So I want to tell you a story about me, and then I'm going to share some thoughts about how you might apply this concept to other areas of your life. So let's begin with the origin story of 3-minute abs. So 3-minute abs begins with my pregnancy of my twin boys. I've got fraternal twin boys who actually turn 2 tomorrow. So how perfect is this timing? And when they were born together, my kids weighed over 15 pounds. That's a lot of baby to carry around. And they were induced at 38 weeks. I think they would have stayed in longer, but 38 weeks is full term for twins. So my OB just kicked them out. And that was really tough on my body, especially in the 3rd trimester. In particular, it was really tough on my lower back, all that weight that I was holding in front. And if you want to visualize me accurately during my pregnancy, and who wouldn't want that, you really need to visualize me with a belly harness. My belly harness was this thick white strap with elastic and, of course, with Velcro that went around my waist. If you've been backpacking before, you know those big hip straps so that like the weight of your backpack goes on your hips and not as much on your shoulders. It was kind of like that, but it was even thicker, maybe 10 inches thick. So I started with this belly harness maybe late in my 2nd trimester, just wearing it when I took walks because I was moving more. And eventually I was spending all day with it on. And my daily walks, which were so useful for me for stress relief, I really love taking a walk every day. And also, this was actually the early days of COVID, so it was basically the only thing I did outside the house. They kept getting shorter and shorter, and then they eventually went away because of the back pain. And then there was a week when I couldn't walk, but I could do some prenatal yoga, some bending. And then I specifically remember the day that I called my mom. It was about a month before I ended up giving birth, and I was like, Mom, yoga is out. And I realized that I'd be spending most of my days just sitting or lying down. And that last month of my pregnancy, that huge white Velcro and elastic harness that I've described, it didn't even work anymore because I was so huge. It just kept bursting open. And I had a different harness, which maybe worked a tiny amount, but it had these like dorky straps that went over my shoulders and it showed under everything. So whenever I even just went to the grocery store, I was just wearing this extremely dorky harness. And at that time, I was literally rationing out bathroom trips to myself. I didn't want to get up too much because my back hurt a lot. So that's just a fun little interlude to say my core was not in great shape by the end of my pregnancy. And then, of course, I had a C-section because both of my kids were in a breech position. I mean, both of them. Can you imagine the nerve? And so, obviously, of course, cutting muscles in your core with a scissors or a knife or whatever they do, it's super great for your core strength. So after my kids were born, I kept pulling my back, which ranged from pretty mild to quite serious. There was one day when I pulled it suddenly and I couldn't even walk from the kitchen to their nursery, and I had to crawl on the floor, and then I spent the whole day and some of the next day sort of not even able to walk. And I just knew that this was going to keep being a problem. So I got this very well-known online program for moms to improve their core after pregnancy. It was a good program. It was 15 minutes a day plus an extra 25 minutes, 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, depending on the week. And I did it very consistently, not perfectly, but consistently for quite some time. And I did have way fewer times when I pulled my back, which was great. And then I went back to work, and then my coaching work really picked up, and I just stopped being as consistent. It felt like a fair amount of time to spend just on my core. And it was kind of physically challenging, so I sort of put it off. And I had to break out my laptop each time to watch this thing. And if you've been around my world for a while, you realize that I don't really love being on screens when I don't have to. I like space from my screens. So I didn't love that either. And I think that was part of what happened. And in the background, my kids kept getting bigger. They're just these really big, heavy kids, especially one of them, which for their health and well-being, I love. It's just that being a mother, the moms of older kids probably already know this, but it's actually a very physical sport. You're constantly leaning over to pick up your children, especially when they're little. You're picking them up out of cribs, off of the floor. And I'd had twins, so I was doing that times 2. And then, picking up your kind of heavy stroller. I had these double strollers to put in the car. And then we had these clip-in car seats, which are pretty heavy. So you sort of clip them out and then carry kids into the house in these car seats. Anyway, this is all to say, I had a lot of physical needs. I needed a functional core. And if you'll remember my story, I'd kind of stopped doing that kind of fancy ab routine. Enter 3-minute abs. I think probably the biggest input or inspiration to 3-minute abs was that I saw a YouTube video, and I don't think I actually even watched it, but the idea stuck with me that doing 1 minute of planks per day, just 1 minute, could have a huge positive impact on your life and your fitness. And I was like, I think I could do 1 minute of planks per day. I think that is available to me. So I started with just 1 minute planks. And then over time, I added another 2 1-minute ab situations. So for 3-minute abs, I just do 3 1-minute ab exercises. So for all of you following at home, here we have found 3-minute abs. I have 2 different sets and I alternate days. So there's like 6 1-minute exercises. I don't think you need to know my exact ab exercises, but I'm kind of nosy and curious. So I will say that there's like a traditional plank, and there's side planks on each side. And then there's a reverse plank, which is actually the hardest of all, for the record. And then some other things. I wasn't able to hold them all for the full minute when I started, but I worked up to it. Okay, so that's 3-minute abs. There's a few absolutely freaking amazing things about 3-minute abs. The first one is that I'm extremely consistent about them, and it doesn't really feel that hard. And I will say that it's not like I do them every single day. I would call that perfection, and I'm not perfect, but the vast majority of days I do it. And of course, it takes 3 minutes. Basically, as soon as you begin, you're done. So that's like the key, of course, to 3-minute abs. And I'll share 2 other things I did to make it even easier for the 3-minute abs to happen. You may have heard of these or thought of these before, but I think it's just sometimes helpful to get this reminder. The first one is that I link it to something else that I do regularly. So in my case, I lie on the floor every day for 10 minutes and I do nothing. It's my own form of kind of meditation and calming my nervous system. I'm sure I'll talk about it more in later podcasts. And that's something that's pretty important to me and that I am quite consistent with, and something that I look forward to. So linking it to something easy helped me sort of make sure that I don't forget. But also, again, 3-minute abs are easy. So it's not, as long as I remember to do it, I'm not going to avoid doing it. And number 2, which again, you've probably also heard of, but can be a good reminder that it works. I make a literal box to check on my to-do list, and then I get to check it after I've done this insanely easy thing. It's perfect. And so I just say those extra 2 little tips because I do both of those things just so my brain doesn't have to try particularly hard to remember 3-minute abs. Again, they're so easy for me to do that I don't really have any drama about doing it. In fact, it usually actually lifts my mood to do it, which is actually the second amazing thing about 3-minute abs. It's just enough physical activity to kind of like energize me. I always feel genuinely happier afterwards, like my mood is better. And as a side note, I've often observed this, that a very small amount of physical activity can sometimes have a startlingly positive impact on mood. For example, one thing that I sometimes do when I feel a little bit sad or depressed or anxious is I do 3 push-ups. 3. I challenge you to try that one sometime. It's not like everything in your life is fixed if you do 3 push-ups, but there's a meaningful little bump. And also, I will say I'm not very good at push-ups, so you might adjust that number depending on your upper body strength. But the key is to make it easy, because even that small little bit does help. But back to 3-minute abs, I feel meaningfully happier afterwards. Not, again, a complete revolution, but there's a difference, and that also makes it easy. It makes it something I look forward to. And the third amazing thing about 3-minute abs is that it actually totally works. I haven't pulled my back in a really long time. And remember, I have toddlers now, and one of my kids is over 35 pounds. He's a giant, almost 2-year-old, and he loves to be held. And he's always coming over and asking to be picked up from the ground. And picking kids up from the ground when you are standing, that requires a very functional core. So my main offering to you from this podcast is this. What in your life could you turn into 3-minute abs? What in your life could you turn into 3-minute abs? I know, it's not like the idea of make it insanely easy and doable has never occurred to you. Sometimes, of course, coaching is completely blowing your mind with a totally new idea. And sometimes coaching is sharing an idea that you might have heard before, but at just the right moment and in just the right way, so that it actually lands and you actually do something about it. With my one-on-one clients, I do this by really deeply understanding their particular context so I can give them just the right idea at just the right time. I can't do that with you, dear listener. So I try to do that with this story. So again, what in your life could you turn into 3-minute abs? Maybe you take that literally, like maybe your home is too cluttered and you spend 3 minutes a day cleaning it or neatening things up. Maybe you want to feel better in your body, so you spend 3 minutes a day cutting fruits and vegetables and putting them in a Tupperware or a plastic baggies, or of course, reusable silicone baggies to have in your fridge. You could have actually a really big supply of very healthy snacks on 3 minutes a day, side note. So maybe you take it literally, or maybe you take it metaphorically. Maybe you find something ridiculously easy and pleasurable that would help you achieve your goals. Like maybe you take a walk around the block, literally just around your block and back home once a day. It might be slightly more than 3 minutes, but it's easy. It improves your mood, it improves your focus, and lowers your anxiety. And if your mood and anxiety and focus have not been so hot lately, that would be perfect. Or, for example, maybe you're trying to spend more time away from screens, so you try to read a romance novel for a half hour after dinner. Or you can sub in whatever you like, fantasy novels, sci-fi, you do you. Romance novels are pretty easy sells for me, so it's easy. It's not a heavy lift, but it does limit your time on TikTok or Netflix or whatever you're up to. And maybe you could do some of the things that I do to help make this really easy practice even easier to remember. Maybe you could tie the practice to something you already do, or make a box to check on your to-do list. So maybe you link that romance novel to finishing dinner. So you do it right after dinner, for example. So it's really easy to remember. And the last thing I want to remind you about is that when you make things easy, when you do them consistently, you get to unlock the magic, and it's actually magic, of momentum. One thing that I've observed time and again with my one-on-one coaching clients is that the human brain and the human spirit respond so well to momentum. Partially, of course, the momentum helps them accomplish their goals, like the 3-minute abs helped me have a functional core. But also, whenever my clients go from stagnant to having momentum, they're just actually happier, genuinely happier, separate from the goal accomplishment. Momentum leads to happiness, in my experience. So again, let me just say that question that I said before really loudly and very assertively so you cannot possibly miss it. What in your life could you turn into 3-minute abs? What in your life could you turn into 3-minute abs this week, today? And whenever you think of 3-minute abs, I hope that you will have a vivid image of me in a pregnancy harness looking beyond cool. As always, I'm rooting for you in the day and the week ahead. You've got this. Bye, team. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.